Happy Friday, scholars. It is National Military Spouse Appreciation Day, which means if someone is married to or involved with, it sounds so happy Friday, Bulldogs. Today is National Military Spouse Appreciation Day, so people who are married to people in the military, today is their day. Today, what we're going to be able to do is explain the significance of Florence and the advances in painting and sculpture. So yesterday we did architecture and engineering. Today we're talking about painting and sculpture. So we get to look at some art for all my art people. We have a quick two now. We have guided practice and then independent practice. No notes today again. So here's your do now. This is from yesterday and the day before. One, why was Florence called the cradle of the Renaissance? Two, how were Florence's industries related to city's culture? Three, where did Florentines get ideas for the designs of their buildings? Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and you can answer questions 1, 2, and 3. All right, so number 1, why was Florence called the cradle of the Renaissance? The answer is going to be A, the Renaissance developed there. It's called the cradle of the Renaissance because when you have a baby, you put them in a cradle. So it's like the baby. So it was born there. 2, how were Florence's industries related to the city's culture? That's going to be wealthy patrons who got wealthy off of industry, sponsored many artists. Where did Florentines get ideas for the designs of their buildings? That would be B, from their study of Greek and Roman ruins connected to humanism. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is read a little bit about painting, and then we're going to contrast here Renaissance and medieval art. Okay, so wealthy patrons made Renaissance Florence a thriving center of art. The Medicis spent huge sums of money on fine palaces, paintings, and statues. The Palazzo Medici was filled with works of art that were commissioned or paid for by the family. Patrons like the Medicis created opportunities for talented painters who made a number of advances in style and technique. As you learned in the last chapter, Renaissance painters were influenced by the renewed interest in classical culture and the spread of humanism. They wanted to depict real people who were posed in lifelike ways and who showed feelings. They also wanted to include realistic backgrounds. The result was was a very different style from the more flat, rigid painting of the Middle Ages. So we're going to, in our chart, describe what medieval painting looked like here, and then contrast that with Renaissance painting. So what was the difference between the two? What did medieval painting look like? And what did Renaissance painting look like? What were their characteristics? So you can go ahead and pause the video and answer those questions. All right. So here, and I'm sorry my screen is like, has it blocked off, but the very last sentence of the paragraph, the second paragraph, says that medieval painting was flat and rigid. So very rough. And we're going to look at some of this painting in just a second. And then in Renaissance, it was very lifelike and realistic. So I see lifelike here. I see the word realistic here. I don't go into too much detail because I'm just filling in a chart. And we're going to look at some painting in just a second, but go ahead and pause the video if you need to get that down. All right, so here's some medieval art, and I have a link here. It's not required, but if you want to look at some, it just takes you to another website that has some more medieval art. But again, you can see it's very rigid, okay, and it's very disproportioned. I always think of this particular, oh, there where my face go. I always think of this particular painting here because the baby has this tiny head, but it has the body of like a grown man. So it's very like not realistic at all. It's disproportioned. It doesn't make much sense. But we can see in the other paintings, it's kind of just like drawn. It's 2D. There's no depth or anything like that. It's just literally someone just drew on a piece of paper. There's really no emotion. There's just like especially here, there's just like faces. Just very not realistic. And then we look at Renaissance art here, and we see here's Mona Lisa, we see depth, we see, there's something in the background, there's a realistic background of a forest. We see paintings here and sculptures where the people look actually like people and have their body movements and shapes. All right, we're going to keep going with some art. This is Adoration of the Magi, and this is a religious piece. Remember, we still have quite a bit of religious influence, but it's just not the only thing that exists. One key advance made by Renaissance painters was the discovery of perspective. This is extremely important. Painters use perspective to create the appearance of depth on a flat surface, so distance. Renaissance artists used several techniques to indicate depth. One was the size of objects. The smaller a painted object, the farther away it appears to be. The larger an object, the closer it appears to be. Painters also learned that a feeling of depth could be created by lines that came closer together as they receded or went back into the distance. They discovered that careful shading could make figures and objects look three-dimensional. Adoration of the Magi, a famous painting by Botticelli, shows some of these techniques. And we can see this here. The people that are closer to us are larger. And as you go back, things begin to be smaller. So, briefly describe two Renaissance advances in painting styles. Go ahead and pause the video and answer that question. All right, so Renaissance figures were realistic with lifelike poses and emotions. And I got that from the last slide. So you can go back to, just because you're on this slide doesn't mean you can't refer to previous slides, guys. Don't think that. And then Renaissance art used more realistic backgrounds, giving a sense of depth or space. So that would be primarily from this slide. So if you don't have that, or if you don't have anything like that, please get that down so that you have the correct answer. If you are basically having the same thing in different words, you're fine. You don't need to erase everything and retype it. All right, so for independent practice, you are going to read about a little bit more about art here, and you're going to talk about advances in painting tech. Oh, that should not be painting technique. Oh, no, technique. Yeah, that's good. And then you are going to have a written response with CER. How did humanism affect sculpture? Okay, so you're going to read this first and talk about how humanism affected sculpture. Again, you want to use your claim. You want to paraphrase from the text. You do not need a quote, and then you need your reasoning. So no quote is needed. Then you're going to continue to read. Here, I want to know about what was so amazing about Donatello's David and what about Michelangelo's David. So Michelangelo was actually a student of Donatello, or not a student, but he influenced Michelangelo. And so he actually kind of reinterprets one of his previous statues. Then you are going to answer the question, a man who was experienced or talented in many areas during this time was known as a Renaissance man. Why would Michelangelo fall into this category? And then you're done. All right, and then I will see you on Monday and we'll finish up some advances in Florence, and then we will move on to some really, really important people during this time period that helped us in literature and science and some other areas too. So you all have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you Monday.